Now, ladies and gentlemen, we would like to move on to the keynote speeches. The first speaker is Akira Amori, Minister in charge of Economic Revitalization of Japan. The topic is the role of Japan and the Japan-US relationship in constructing an economic order in the Asia-Pacific region. Minister Amori, please.
Ladies and gentlemen, I thank you, first of all, for the kind introduction. I am indeed very grateful to be invited to this international symposium. The role of Japan and Japan-US relationship in constructing an economic order in the Asia-Pacific region is the theme I have been given for my keynote speech. Back in October in Atlanta, United States, we have seen broad agreement for the TPP, the Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement. I would like to mainly focus on this agreement. TPP is indeed an agreement which will bring forward a new economic order for the Asia-Pacific. A TPP is also extremely important for bilateral relationship between Japan and the United States. We are welcoming Ms. Wendy Cutler from the United States. Up until very recently, she was with the USTR. She was in the number 2 position, responsible for the TPP negotiation. In that, we were able to be successful in our agreement. Half of that credit should go to Ms. Wendy Cutler. If it was Ambassador Fromm and I myself, we would have just fought with each other, being so cantankerous. But Ms. Wendy Cutler has been the force in the bringing forth the success. And having commended her so much, I'm sure she would not badmouth me afterwards in her keynote speech, I hope. The assessment of Ms. Cutler in Japan is that she has the capability, as an American, having been able to understand fully the feelings and emotions of us Japanese, which is what Ambassador Oe, her counterpart, has always told me as in explaining about her. The TPP is the framework which would hold a good promise for the future prosperity, not only for Japan, but for the whole of the Asia-Pacific, not just in tariffs, but also in services, investment, intellectual properties, and in the SOEs, state-owned enterprises, in broad spectrum of issues and sectors. The TPP constructs the rules as befitting to the 21st century trade and investment. And people, goods, capital, and information will be able to be freely flowing through the whole of Asia-Pacific. We will be seeing such an economic zone being born. TPP will encompass 800 million people, 10% of the global population, and 40% of the world GDP, 3,100 trillion yen, which is in the scale of 1.4 times the NAFTA and 1.5 times the European Union and 11 times as big as the ASEAN and 6 times as big as the Japanese economy. We are seeing such gigantic common market being born. The TPP, furthermore, opens its doors wide for all the economies and territories within the APEC. And there are long queue of countries and territories waiting to join in the waiting circle, so to speak. There are various benefits to the TPP. That tariffs on industrial products will be almost 100% being eliminated, and regulation on investment services will also be eliminated. And furthermore, the rules to do with investment and intellectual property rights will be clarified and become more transparent. So there will be enormous benefits and advantages to do with the TPP. But today, I would like to speak more of an essential meaning and significance of TPP, going beyond the specific sectors. We have seen the WTO negotiation coming to a head. So 8 years or 9 years ago, I was the minister responsible for trade and industry and international trade. The METI minister, I was directly responsible for the WTO negotiations, so I have keenly felt the problem to do with WTO. And immediately the race was begun amongst the different countries for bilateral FTAs and EPAs. There are more than 270 FTAs and EPAs around the world already entered into force. Republic of Korea have put forward that it is their national strategy in becoming a hub country for the FTA. And the coverage by Korea of the FTAs is more than 40%, which is about double the level of Japan. So bilateral FTAs and EPAs are the networking, joining dots, two dots. So a nation having bigger and wider network would be at the advantage in terms of trade. And in actuality, during the time when yen was strong and the Korean won was weak, the Japanese businesses, many of them had to transfer their operations to Korea. But with the FTAs, numerous agreements coming into being, it would be like a spaghetti ball, too complicated in terms of rules as well as the tariff rates. And the relative advantage will also be diluted. On the other hand, TPP is not trying to connect the dots or the lines, but to think more in terms of two-dimensional area, to try to go beyond the horizontal supply chain division of labor, but to create a totally new value on that two-dimensional area space. And all the participating countries to come into one to try to aim for a sustainable growth engine. It is not just aggregation of the existing bilateral FTAs, but qualitatively, TPP is totally different. 2 years ago, when Japan has officially announced that we will be joining TPP, the term mega FTA have now been often heard. According to JETRO's, the report on world trade and investment in that year, it said that Japan joining the TPP will further spur the wide area economic partnerships, such as the TTIP between US and EU, as well as RCEP and the Japan-EU EPA. And mega FTAs have been triggered by the TPP, with Japan last joining. And Japan, because of our sensitivities in agriculture, when it comes to bilateral FTA, we were 1 or even 2 laps behind the other countries. But Japan, who was left behind, has now announced that we are joining the TPP, and we have declared that we will lead the process for rules making. There was much impact on the whole world. Professor Richard Florida has come up with the concept of the mega region. Those winners of the global competition would be those countries who think in terms of wide areas and regions as a unit in creating new values, to bring a group of countries together as one region or one group. Those who will be able to remain in winning the competition would go beyond the borders to try to attract creative talents and businesses like a magnet to try to lead the global innovation. Mega FTA is to aim for the creation of center of innovation, to try to go beyond the traditional boundaries of just the FTAs and EPAs, promoting trade. The salient feature of the Asia-Pacific is that it is full of vitality and possibilities. There are the two economic giants in the world, Japan and United States, existing in Asia-Pacific. There is dynamic and growing economy seen in this region. We also see vast continent and ocean with vast amount of natural resources dormant. So as compared to the other regions of the world, Asia-Pacific has a vitality and the magnitude of potential which is far greater. What I have just read and quoted, do you know when this paragraph was actually written? It was more close to 40 years ago. It is one paragraph from the Pan-Pacific Solidarity Vision as put forward by former Japanese Prime Minister Mr. Ohira. The late Prime Minister Ohira was quite concerned that already the GATT system has been weakened and was fading. So in order to aim for globalism with the world to be covered, we should first of all try out on a regional cooperation aiming for wide area economic zones to be created, and then to be built further up to a global cooperation. He says, if I may quote, the countries in the Pacific, including Japan, by strengthening cooperative relationship and interdependence with each other, would give new vitality to the maintenance of free and open international economic system. And Asia-Pacific would be the new players in the globalism, which would be the basis for the further prosperity and the growth of the global economy. What I have just quoted would give you the feeling, even 40 years ago, the very bold ambition and the dynamism in that Japan was aiming to lead in creating such economic partnership. What the late Prime Minister Ohira was thinking was to create an open regionalism. And this is exactly meeting with the spirit of the TPP. That TPP is not just for the 12 member countries, but it is open for the whole of the APEC. So the late Prime Minister Ohira, with his vision of the Pan-Pacific cooperation, have visited Australia and met with the then Prime Minister Fraser of Australia, and they have come to agreement in promoting this vision. And then the Pacific Economic Cooperation Conference that was established. And after 10 years, with Japan and Australia taking joint initiative, the APEC, as we see today, has been launched. So TPP is a framework to try to deepen the partnership within APEC. APEC is an organization with loose ties and partnership to be forged to try to share a new and high level of standards and rules, to try to create an economic partnership with a legally binding power and which is also very sophisticated. Now, the one special feature of Asia-Pacific is diversity. Looking at the stage of economic development, there are economies with different levels of development and different stages of development. There are countries who are blessed with abundant natural resources, and there are those countries who are specializing in trade, and there are those countries who have enormous population. Because of such abundant diversity, we see vitality and potential for the region. So ever since the Prime Minister Ohira's the wishes, Japan has always strived to become the bridge between the advanced countries and developing countries, placing a lot of emphasis and respect to the diversity in the Asia-Pacific. I myself, in the 2.5 years of very tough TPP negotiation, I have always in my mind had this role for Japan to play, to be the bridge between the developing and the developed countries. So in August 2 years ago, The first ministerial meeting after Japan has officially joined the TPP was held in Brunei, Darussalam. At the very outset, the chair has kindly asked me to say a few words of greetings because it was the first time for me to participate. And I have ignored the text prepared by the officials. And immediately I said that the TPP should be brought forward in a form which will be win-win for every economy participating. We should not have one particular strong and the big countries' systems to be unilaterally be forced on. For Japan, we had the sensitivity with agriculture that we would not be able to eliminate every tariffs on the agriculture. But for the other countries, some countries, it was difficult to try to immediately accept the rules of the advanced countries. We have to respect each other, to be able to understand fully each other's position, to try to respect the sensitivities. That should be the basic stance. But having said that, then try as hard as possible to minimize those sensitivities. And that was the intent of my comments. After my statement, there were many other ministers coming to me and telling me that my statement was very positive and good.
In 2011, prior to Japan's participation in the negotiations, parties in TPP talks held a summit meeting in Honolulu and issued the Honolulu Statement. It stated that the TPP was to be an ambitious and comprehensive agreement aiming at achieving high levels of liberalization. Subsequently, this phrase in the statement was used in every ministerial statement to follow. The statement issued after the Brunei ministerial meeting added another word, balanced, to the phrase. Balance has many meanings. For instance, the balance between the developed and the developing countries, the balance in that the negotiations include not just those on tariffs, but also rulemaking as well. Balance between pursuing ambitions and giving considerations to sensitivities. Aiming at high standards and high levels is fine. We must do so. But if we are to pursue perfection, we will never reach perfection, however long and hard we may negotiate for decades. To conclude the negotiations in a win-win fashion, I believe the key word is going to be balance. And this very word, balance, was included in the final statement published in Atlanta as well. Actually, the text we first saw as a new official participant in the TPP talks was very different from the one that was finally agreed upon. And this is testimony to the leadership our country's negotiating team has demonstrated in the discussions to a substantial degree. To avoid misunderstanding, I would like to clearly say that Japan has never argued that standards be relaxed for the sake of developing countries. Take the investment rules, for example. Roughly speaking, there are only 2 investor countries, Japan and the US, while the rest of the 10 countries are all recipients of investments or host countries with respect to investments. And the chapter on investment in the agreement stipulates the rules the host countries must adhere to, because the split between the investor and the host countries is 2 to 10. Discussions naturally do not proceed as smoothly. And Japan argued against including performance requirements where host countries would be able to demand technology transfers from investing countries. And this is a tougher discipline that imposed under the WTO. And Japan succeeded in keeping such requirements out of the agreement. But we, on the other hand, included anti-abuse provisions with respect to ISDS, which is an issue of concern. Under ISDS, the investors can sue the state governments. And so we included an anti-abuse provisions with respect to ISDS, which has been a concern for developing countries, making sure to strike the right balance there again. In the process of TPP negotiations, I discussed with USTR Mr. Froman for so many hours. I even had him in my dreams. And it was so much that it almost felt like it was too much. And of course, the main discussions with him, of course, were on the outstanding issues between Japan and the US. But I also continued to say to Mr. Froman that we need to strike right balance in the issues that affect all the 12 participating countries too. And that was the case for the discussion on pharmaceuticals or biologics protection periods that continue to be contentious until the very last moments in Atlanta. An agreement that is to be beneficial only to the U.S. will not spread to other countries. Only when the agreement is well balanced and attractive will it have a greater potential to spread far and beyond. And this is the very kind of agreement I'm sure the U.S. will welcome, because the rules under such an agreement are the ones the U.S. was involved in making, and those are the rules that are going to be the global standards. And these are the points I persistently kept on making to Mr. Froman. So with the 12 countries together, we're going to create global standards. It's going to be ambitious, but it has to be something that everyone can participate in. Once we achieve that, we will be able to create something that could become the global standards. That's what I kept on telling Mr. Froman. And there was another person I collaborated throughout, and that was Minister Rob from Australia. In the Asia-Pacific region, cooperation between Japan and Australia has always played an important role, I believe. I have known Minister Rob for 20 years. We have meals together and speak to each other, quite frankly, whenever we attend ministerial meetings. It is because of this cooperation between our countries in leading the discussions on SOEs, state-owned enterprises, that despite the initial disagreement by the developing countries to impose any discipline on SOEs, we were able to persuade the developing countries to agree to start from realistic levels in terms of discipline on SOEs. So such was the severity and the difficulty of the talks leading up to the TPP agreement. Now that it's been agreed upon, it's necessary for us in Japan to utilize it fully for our country's economic and local area revitalization. TPP indeed is a trump card for Japan's growth strategy. Following the basic agreement on October 5th, we have taken swift actions. On October 9th, the Japanese government set up a TPP task force comprised of all the cabinet members. On November 25th, after a series of vigorous discussions among the government and the ruling parties, we decided on a comprehensive TPP-related policy framework. And this TPP policy framework consists of 3 pillars. Pillar number 1 is that Japan will aim at becoming a new exporting power. So much misunderstanding abounds regarding TPP, including a groundless criticism which claims that TPP benefits only large companies and that there are only disadvantages to be had by smaller companies. Large companies are already globalized. It is the middle market companies and the SMEs who stand to potentially gain from the TPP, especially those who have wanted to expand overseas but not been able to do so thus far, or those who had deployed abroad but have had difficult experiences and perhaps are thinking twice. They are the ones who will have the opportunity to utilize the TPP, and as a result, the exporter base will broaden from one that used to be essentially comprised of large companies to one that includes middle market and SME companies. The focus of exports that used to be mainly industrial goods can now be expanded to agricultural commodities and services, and that is why we're calling our target a new exporting power. In Nagano Prefecture, there's an SME called Shinshu Ceramics, the company owns patents in antibacterial products for medical use and wants to expand their business in other Asian countries, but has not been able to make the decision out of fear that their patent rights may be infringed upon or that they may be forced to transfer their technology as an investor in the host country. Under the TPP, intellectual property rights will be protected even more vigorously than under the WTO. All the unreasonable demands made by the host countries will be banned. Upon learning this, the CEO of this company in Nagano says that because of the assurances offered by the TPP rules, he's looking to do business in Vietnam. And following the basic agreement, we have been receiving an increasing number of inquiries from SMEs as to how they can prepare for making overseas market entries and what assistance or support is available for them to use. We rushed in developing the TPP policy framework precisely because we wish to present government policy directions to such SMEs that are highly motivated. Incidentally, I'm told that a certain mid-sized company who had shifted their main factory to Indonesia is considering the possibility of returning the factory back to Japan in view of their plan to start business in Vietnam. The greatest benefit of the TPP is that companies can expand into overseas markets while maintaining their base right here in Japan. Overseas expansion in place, if you will. The government will make sure to implement policies that allow companies to take full advantage of this benefit. The second pillar of the policy framework is for Japan to be a global hub or international hub for trade and investment. Business expansion overseas by Japanese companies will give rise to increased demand for excellent products and services that these companies offer and will generate requests for new products and services in the overseas markets or proposals for joint R&D activities from potential overseas partners. There will actually be inbound investments flowing into Japan as well. All of that will create innovation, productivity enhancements, and economic growth in this country. In Hiroshima, there's a company called Toda Kogyo, mid-sized materials manufacturer. This company has, through an open innovation approach, disclosed all the technologies they have and has actively sought overseas partners. As a result, they were approached by a well-known Western company to strike a partnership and is now engaged in joint research and investment activities to develop new products. As such, the advantage of the TPP is that it supports the creation of new value and more of these global value chains as well. Whenever we mention overseas business expansion, people say pulling out of industry, that is the effect. But that is not the case with the TPP, because under the TPP, Japan will be the base or the hub to attract, like magnets, investments, technologies, and creative talents from overseas. TPP is about creating innovation centers that would generate new values in the region. And by the way, the share of inbound investment into our country as a percentage of GDP is a meager 4%, the lowest among the 12 countries. We will actively launch policies to improve this going forward. From overseas business expansion to inbound investment and productivity enhancements brought about by domestic innovation, they will all contribute to Japan's economic growth and growth in trade and investment. We are now calculating the economic impact of such a favorable cycle created by the TPP. And we hope to announce the results of the analysis by the end of the year. Now, the third pillar, in terms of the TPP effect, is actually to formulate policies that ushers in a new era of agricultural administration that gives dreams and hopes, and to support the conversion of agriculture, forestry, and fisheries into industries on the offensive. TPP offers us an opportunity for Japan to showcase the high potential that it has in its agriculture, forestry, and fisheries sectors. Future farming sector requires a business sense and a business strategy. Industrialization of farming and turning farming households into enterprises or corporations is what is called for. It's essential for the farmers, therefore, to act as business managers and have an idea as to how to structure their agricultural activities as a business that would require marketing, branding, and IT systems. So initiatives will be taken to turn agriculture, forestry, and fisheries into growth industries. Under the TPP, Japanese meat produced from dairy cattle, Holstein, for example, will inevitably have to compete with the US or Australian beef, it is said, and that we're going to be at a disadvantage. But an initiative is ongoing to produce Wagyu beef by injecting fertilized Wagyu eggs into dairy cattle. So, from Holstein, you're able to produce Wagyu beef. That's the technology we have here in Japan. And we will also look to utilize GI, geographic indications, to develop overseas demand for Japan's high-quality agriculture, forestry, and fisheries products as well. TPP not only helps to create deeper trade and investment relations between Japan and the US, but also greatly contributes to the economic development of the Asia-Pacific region and serve as the cornerstone for a new set of rules for trade in the 21st century, and further lead to long-term intra-regional stability. The agreement concluded this time has also proven that through the joint leadership of Japan and the US, we can overcome difficult issues and make global contributions. And let me conclude by expressing my hope that today's discussions will be an opportunity for further enhancing and deepening the Japan-US relationship in the years to come. Thank you very much for your kind attention.